Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com, and here, boxed up for your delectation, is Osmo Vnsk's mostly mediocre Minnesota Mahler cycle. Ugh, really, seriously. What a disappointment this has turned out to be. There are a couple high spots, as of course there must be, but nothing that would justify these people doing a Mahler cycle. Frankly, there was nothing that justified them doing a Sibelius cycle either. It seems to me that since the Beethoven symphony cycle, which was really a high point for the Vänskä-Minnesota relationship, it's been a steady slide into dullness. Really serious dullness, boringness. I mean, the orchestra plays beautifully, but the performances have been so lacking in tension. I remember vividly seeing Vänskä do a Nielsen Fifth Symphony with the New York Philharmonic a couple of decades ago, and it was just so exciting. It was absolutely thrilling. And I met Vänskä afterwards. He's a very nice guy and a good musician. And he was very excited with the way the performance had went, and he expressed his hope that they would invite him back, and it seems like they never did. I don't know. I don't know what's happened. I really don't. After his wonderful series of recordings for Lottie and the Sibelius cycle and other things that he did for other Finnish composers, he's a good conductor. He's a very good conductor. But it seems like, excuse me, but it seems like when he got to Minnesota, he had this really good orchestra, and they obviously liked each other. But there was this sort of narcissistic, I just don't know. He became very mannered, kind of micromanagey, and these performances reflect all of his worst habits, actually, all of them. Let's take them one symphony at a time, shall we? You have, first of all, a dreadful Symphony Number 1. I mean, Symphony Number 1 is practically unkillable. It's exciting, it's fresh, it's full of interesting colors. None of that comes through here. It really doesn't. It's a performance of the totally flat lines and settles for mere prettiness. It never attempts to plumb the emotional extremes that Mahler's music embodies. I mean, if you're not going to go for it, then just don't waste our time. The Second Symphony has the same issues. The first movement was very soggy. I mean, just very unatmospheric. Vänskä doesn't seem to have much affinity for the interesting colors of Mahler's orchestra, the quiet percussion, the spooky, flecks of atmosphere that you hear from interesting instruments, the strain that Mahler induces from having, his orchestra play things very high or very low. I mean, none of that's there. It's all just pretty. And you just don't want that with Mahler symphonies. The third, which I talked about quite recently because it was the last of the series, is a very good performance for the most part. After the first movement, it's splendid. The first movement is a little bit lacking in tension and contrast, tempo contrast, but it's not bad. It's one of the better performances in the cycle, as is the fourth, which you might expect because the fourth, with its sort of neoclassical facade and highly polished surface, is just the kind of thing that Vänskä, this orchestra, would do well. And they do. It's a beautiful performance. 5 and 6, disasters. Absolute disasters, because then you're back to the Mahler of extremes, the high drama. And the fifth has absolutely none of that in the first couple of movements. It's just a snooze fest. The sixth is just one of the worst performances you've ever heard in your life. The first movement is completely dead. Vänskä takes the scherzo third instead of second, which is wrong. I'm sorry. I mean, you just get to the point where you have to be a little bit dogmatic about it. I know that's what the critical edition did and all that stuff, but it just doesn't make nearly as much musical sense as having the scherzo play second. And again, after the hammer blows, when the orchestra should just go crazy and erupt and scream and shriek, and there's nothing. It's as placid as a lake on a summer day. You can see your reflection in the water. And that is not what you want. The seventh, surprisingly good, because it's so weird that there isn't much you can do to mess it up unless you have really bizarre tempos or totally ignore what Mahler wrote. And it's one of the better ones. The eighth is fabulous. It's the high point of the entire cycle, one of the great eighths, and they should have just done the eighth. and just left the rest of it alone. That would have been ideal, quite frankly. 9 is good, but not great. It's one of the better ones, I definitely think. It benefits from, Vnsk's, exploration of inner voices, sometimes his clarity of texture, and the beautiful string playing. I mean, it has its lovely moments. It's not the most gripping. It's not the most emotionally intense, but it's decent. The 10th is in Derek Cook's version, which is one of the better versions. It's the one to use if you're going to use it at all. And again, it's not bad, but it doesn't hold your attention the way the piece ought to. I mean, that's partly the fault of the edition, the state at which Mahler got to when he passed away, because there's not enough of it there to make it absolutely gripping from beginning to end, particularly in the finale. And a performance like this is not the kind of thing that's going to substitute, the necessary missing emotional element, as, for example, Kurt Sanderling or Michael Gielen do. So that's it. And there's no Das Lied von der Erde, which is sort of a shame, because if you're going to do a complete Mahler cycle, you got to do Das Lied von der Erde. It is, after all, a symphony. And if you're going to do the 10th, which was incomplete, why not do Das Lied, which was complete? I don't know. And I'm not going to complain, because that's the food was lousy, but I didn't get a big enough portion. So, why complain about not having Das Lied von der Erde? The sound is terrific, pretty uniformly. These are SACDs. And so, as Robert von Bahr always yells at me to mention the fact that they're SACDs, I couldn't care less, and I suspect most others couldn't care less either. But BIS does make beautiful recordings. Always has, always will, hopefully. And I just wonder why they bothered doing this. I really, really do. Someone spent a lot of money to make this production possible, when there could have been many more interesting and better things that Vänskä and Minnesota could have done that I think would have been far more idiomatic and far more congenial and far less duplicative. And but what can you say? That's what people do these days. The same old, and not as well as the prior same old version either. So keep on listening, friends. Thanks for joining me. Take care.